Let's go to the next tab, which is conditional statements. And we've already talked about this and used a couple of basic examples of this so far. Conditional statements are logic statements, or if-then statements, or if statements, whatever you want to call them, are very powerful ways to get Excel to work for you. It requires some thought. There is some investment that has to go in to building these formulas, to programming Excel, as it were. But over the long term, it saves you a tremendous amount of work. That said, we need to keep in mind that Excel is always going to carry out our instructions perfectly. And if we give it the wrong instructions, it's going to carry those out as well. And so anytime there's a programming error in Excel, it's our fault, which is just unfortunate. It makes you want to cry. How do we build these if statements so that they're an asset to us? To be crystal clear, the if statement basically says if a condition is met, or a condition is present, or a test is passed, then do A, otherwise do B. Or return value A, otherwise return value B. The otherwise is what's known as the default outcome. This is if true, and this is if false. The test was not passed. The condition was not present. So one example is, let's say we're a lender and we're tracking loans, and we are saying, all right, well, if the mortgage is paid late, then there's a penalty fee that's levied. And so that penalty could be a percent of a total, it could be a firm dollar amount. But if there's not a late payment, then the penalty is effectively zero, right? And so we can have, let's say in our spreadsheet, some column where the column is basically tracking a loan. It says for each month, is it paid late? Yes or no? And so if the toggle is set to yes, or the value that's typed in there is set to yes, we would test to see, okay, what is the value there, right? And so we're saying in this cell here, if echo 13, which is where I have the word yes typed in, is equal to yes, and I have yes in quotation marks to represent to Excel that it's a text value, then the penalty is $15. Otherwise, the penalty is $0. So that's one way to do it. Not the ideal way to do it, but it works. Generally speaking, we would encourage you to create variables instead of hard keying values. And this is an example of what people say, if there's a hard coded value in the formula or a hard keyed value in the formula. Meaning, right, even if the penalty changes administratively to $20 or $30, the formula is not going to update. And so you have to actively remember to go into the formula and change it. Whereas if you create variables and say, all right, well, the penalty is actually, it's a rate, and that rate is applied to the mortgage payment amount. Okay, I've created two variables here, which now, if they change, I can just simply change those inputs, and the updated calculation is going to flow through. And so here's another way to do it. We can say, again, if the value is equal to the text value yes, then take the product of 3% and the mortgage payment amount of $500, otherwise zero. So two ways to trigger the penalty calculation, one more simplistic and a little more dangerous over the long term, and this one more recommended in terms of its safety and dynamism.